Okay, so welcome. And yeah, I was saying earlier, it's hard to imagine that we've already arrived at October and we had a wonderful season. So I'm really excited to see everybody, and I'm excited to hear about our data a little bit later and to hear our guest speaker speak. So let's find out how we did on our trivia question really quick. I'll end this poll. Okay, so the correct answer was 150 feet. Looks like most of you guessed 90 feet, which is pretty close, but they can dive down pretty far. So I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to Francis, who's going to do our land acknowledgement this evening.
Thanks, Shannon. As a group, we recognize that we are residing on the ancestral lands of the Coast Salish people. These tribes have lived on and cared for the land and water since time immemorial. We respect and honor all Indigenous people and acknowledge our responsibility to learn the truth about history, support tribal sovereignty and livelihoods, and take action towards inclusion, partnership, uplifting Native communities, and continuing their legacy of stewardship.
Thank you, Francis. All right, so I just wanted to share with you guys. Let's see, hopefully you can see that. This is something that I've been using in my presentations this season. For one thing, because I think you all are pretty awesome. And I really believe that what we're doing here is something incredible. And so I like to brag about our surveyors and our network. And I just got to thinking that you should know this. And so I wanted to share this with you. But I like to say we have citizen science superpowers. For one thing, with working with you all and getting to know a lot of you, I've noticed some traits that are similar. And one of those is that everyone is very dedicated. You're very curious and you want to learn, constantly learn and get new information. And that has motivated you to be committed to collecting consistent data and also committed to our birds. Another thing that's pretty amazing by what we do is that we're not limited by funding constraints or study timelines, which most other researchers have to deal with. This is something that we can do with very little funding, and we can do it over the long term. And we're able to cover a large area as a network, which really lends itself to the pigeon guillemot study because guillemots nest and breed in dispersed colonies. So we are able to cover a larger portion of the population this way. And then I really do want to mention the immense value that we have in our long-term data set. We have a greater ability to analyze trends. We have tons of data, and we already have data that's available. Whidbey Island has been doing this study for over 20 years, so that's a pretty good chunk of data that's ready to pick up and use for analyses. It can be used for many purposes, and we can continue to add to it indefinitely. So I think that's pretty incredible. And
well, I just turned it on when I came down.
Yeah,
So.
I'm just doing it up the text.
Mute.
I'm gonna mute.
Well,
Folks, sorry, guys. So yeah, I just wanted to share that with you all because I am very thankful to be working with you, and I want you to know just how awesome you are. So the next thing I want to do is just introduce everybody to our regional map. And this is important because as a network, it's good to remember that we are all in this bigger thing working together. We're not just doing this on our own. And so the way I actually want to do this is to navigate from our website, and hopefully you all have had a chance to look at our website before. Many of you are probably familiar with the survey toolbox, which comes in handy at the beginning of the season. But tonight I want to introduce the regions to you. And to do that, I'm going to how I can get involved. And down here we have a map, and this map's actually interactive. So if you click on that, and I'm just gonna close this, but if you click on that, you can see all of the regions here. And right now we have 8 different regions. Our newest one is actually San Juan County up here. And if you click on that, you can see the coordinator is Tyler Davis and how you can get in touch with him. And then of course we have Whidbey Island, which was where our survey began. Francis Wood was our founder over 20 years ago with Dr. Phyllis Kind. And now it's coordinated by Lee Badavinas and Michelle Sakaguchi. And then we have a Camino survey area, and Ellen Thurine is the island coordinator. And Clallam County is co-coordinated by Ed Bulby and Bob Freener. And then we have East Jefferson County, which is coordinated by Brenda Johnson. And Bainbridge Island by Cindy Holtz. And Vashon Island is coordinated by Taylor Umetsu and Bianca Perla from the Vashon Nature Center. And then down here we have South Sound, which is coordinated through the Nisqually Reach Nature Center by volunteer coordinator Enrico Corsi and Ann Mills. And you can also, if you click on these little birds, you can actually see what these different colonies are. So anyways, I just thought that might be good for you to see just how far we stretch. We really are encompassing a great portion of the Salish Sea, and we also have room for growth and expansion here. So thank you to all of the regional coordinators for everything that they do. It's during the season, it's a pretty busy job. So I just wanted to say thank you for that. All right, so now I've prepared for you a video, and I had everyone send me photos and videos and colony team selfies throughout the season. So I've put this video together, and let's see. Get this loaded up for you. But anyways, this is sort of in lieu of our storytelling that we usually do each year. And instead, we're going to tell the story through the video. I really wanted folks to be able to kind of see behind the scenes. You know, it is about the birds, but it's also about working together. And we've really built a community here. And I hope that that comes through in the video and that you'll see that. So I hope you all enjoyed the video. Putting it together and watching it, I just really felt how much we're a team. And
Huh?
doing this project has just deepened our connection with the birds and with the beach and with each other. So I hope that you felt that too as you were watching that. So now we are going to move into our data presentation by Dave Kraus. Dave is our data cruncher who's on Whidbey Island, and we would truly be lost without him. So I'm happy to introduce him and hand it over so that we can find out how we did this season.
Yeah, thank you, Shannon. That your video was awesome. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
It's nice to be reminded of how beautiful this place is. Okay, so let's see what I can get here. Hi, everyone. Glad you're all here tonight. You're going to see a lot of charts, and hopefully I explain them well enough for you to understand them as I go through this. It's mostly a review of our 2024 season, but some of the charts show the data from the last 4 years. I think those are the most interesting ones. So, Shannon, do you see my presentation?
Yep, looks good.
All right, great. So I'm going to start just really quickly. I'm thinking there might be a couple of people here who don't actually do this survey. So this is what we collect when we survey. We make PIGU population counts, and we log visits to burrows. We log the prey deliveries that the birds are making to burrows. And we do our best to identify what they're delivering. We record disturbances to the birds and tide information, and we make notes of weather that might impact our ability to see the birds, or that might impact what the birds are doing. Sometimes we have fog that we can't even see them at all, practically. Often we're asked who uses our data, and these are three groups, 3 areas that use our data. The University of Washington, over many years now, has used our data in people doing their master's and doctorate programs. The Puget Sound Ecosystem Monitoring Program has the pigeon guillemot as one of their indicator species. And the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife includes our data in their marine birds database. And they are responsible for building our data system now that stores our data. So we're very fortunate to have them helping us. This is volunteer data for this year. We have 8 regions, as Shannon showed you on the map. And it's pretty cool to see it on a map because it really is a good portion of the Salish Sea that we cover. This year we had 259 volunteers, looking at 63 colonies. 754 surveys were performed, and volunteer hours over 4,800. We may reach 5,000. There's a little bit of data yet to come in. This little chart on the right here just shows that, during the season we're surveying about 60 colonies each week. Before I jump into some charts, I want to cover a few definitions. How we establish the Pigou population. We take the maximum count for each colony during the year. So it's not a single count at the same time at all colonies. It's the maximum count for each colony, and then we sum those to get the population. An active burrow is a burrow that we have seen a Pigou enter, and they may have entered with prey or they may have entered without prey, but all of those burrows together total our number of active burrows. The percent of Pigou attempting to breed basically is 2 times the number of active burrows divided by the Pigou population. So 2 because it's a pair of Pigou, and then times the number of burrows divided by the Pigou population. A chick burrow is a burrow that we've seen a PG enter carrying prey. And we consider those successful burrows. We consider the pair that are entering that burrow to be a successful breeding pair. So the percent that are successfully breeding is the pair of Pigou times the number of chick burrows divided by the Pigou population. And we added a new element this year. We're looking at reproductive success. And this is pretty hypothetical because we don't truly know what the reproductive success of our Pigou is. But it takes 35 days plus or minus for a hatchling to fledge. So we figure that if there is 4 weeks, a minimum of 4 weeks between the first time we see a delivery to a burrow and the last time we see a delivery to a burrow, then that indicates there is a pretty good likelihood that at least one chick fledged from that burrow. Because 4 weeks between is 28 days, and we figure that we probably didn't see the first delivery to that burrow when it happened, and we probably didn't see the last one. So all of those things come in, all those definitions or all those ideas come in handy in the next slides. And this is just a snapshot of the year. The population of Pigou was just about 2,000. When we get a little, the data that you'll see for Clallam isn't quite complete. And when we get all of that data, it'll drive some of these numbers up a little bit. So the population is about 2,000. Active burrows, just under 500. We had 277 chick burrows, and you all saw 1,240 prey delivered of one sort or another. This pie chart here shows the relative populations for each of the regions. And Whitby's been doing it the longest. We have the largest number of colonies. We cover the island pretty thoroughly. Many of the other regions haven't been around for too long, and they're still growing. But it's really interesting to see what they're finding. So there are two charts here that show the breeding success. The chart on the left, the top line, which hovers around, I'm gonna adjust my just this here, hovers around 50% attempting to breed over the last, well, 3 years at any rate. It was a bit lower in 2021. So 50% of the PGs are attempting to breed on average. And the lower line, the orange line, shows that of those attempting to breed, that would be about 60% of those are actually have chicks, develop chicks in their burrow. And as a total of the total PGU, that's about 30%. The chart on the right shows the relative numbers for, or the relative percentages for each of the regions. So some of them are really, like Jefferson and Kitsap and South Sound have relatively high percentages of successful breeding to attempt to breed. The orange bars are pretty high up compared to the blue bars. I think one thing I'm always kind of amazed by with our survey is how consistent our numbers are, like how straight this line is on the left chart for attempting to breed and successfully breeding. These two charts indicate what we think may be the reproductive success of our burrows. So as discussed, the chick burrows with 4 or more weeks between the first delivery and the last delivery, we think they may have had a fledgling or possibly 2 fledglings. So if you're looking at the title up above, out of 1,844 PGU, we developed 277 chick burrows, and of those 277 chick burrows, we wound up with 73 burrows with fledglings. Again, hypothetical. So the chart on the left is basically a distribution of all of our chick burrows. And I'll take this first bar here that shows 95 at the top of it, if you can see that. So the number of weeks between the first and last delivery for this one is 0. So that means that these burrows, we saw prey delivered only one time, only on one survey. So there were no weeks between the first and the last were the same delivery. And there were 95 burrows of our 277 burrows that were like that. Not much of a chance that those were successful burrows from a reproductive standpoint. So using the same idea, the one shows that there was 1 week between the first and last delivery for 25 burrows and on. So the burrows that we feel may have developed fledglings would be from this number 4 weeks between first and last delivery and greater. And that totals those 73 burrows. We have a lot of burrows. We have a lot of burrows that we don't see many deliveries during very many surveys. And there could be lots of reasons for that. You know, they could be delivering, that pair could be delivering at a different time of the day. So it just, we can't be certain about this, any conclusions about how many fledglings there are. This graph on the right shows the compares chick burrows to burrows that we think might have reproductive success. And you can see that the gray bars are the ones we think might have fledglings, and the orange bars are chick burrow numbers. And you can see how those percentages of reproductive success burrows to chick burrows are relatively low. And this chart is kind of a summary of that, of the whole process. The blue bar shows the percent of the total PGs that are attempting to breed at each region. The orange bar shows the percentage that are chick burrows out of that, and the gray bar shows the percentage that we believe might have fledged. So some are relatively low and some are pretty high. Kitsap looks pretty productive here in Jefferson County as well. Whidbey is pretty low, but because we have so many Pigu, we kind of drive the numbers overall. This section is on provisioning of chick burrows, and this first graph on the left shows the average observed deliveries per chick burrow. And that's pretty consistent over the last 4 years. So it's just over 4 deliveries for each burrow. And then the graph on the right shows the distribution of deliveries. And this shows that there are 277 chick burrows total. And if you look at this first vertical blue bar that has 1-2 under it, this is saying that there were 37.5% of the total number of chick burrows that had only 1 or 2 deliveries during the year, and so on as you go out. So there's undoubtedly some relationship between the number of deliveries that a burrow receives and the success of reproduction fledging in that burrow. But again, without actually having some measure of how many chicks there are, it's very difficult to say anything with certainty about how many chicks we might have. So type of prey, this is very consistent too. This chart is the last 4 years, and gunnel and prickleback, this includes prickleback as well, are the predominant prey across all of the regions. Sculpin in the orange is next, and then the gray line are other. It's either we couldn't tell what they were, or they were something else, like perch, for instance, or kittens. Yeah. I was reminded by my wife. So this shows the type of prey by region, and you can see that gunnel and prickleback are even more focus in the other regions. Whidbey has a high number of sculpin, but much higher than any of the other regions. And I think that's partly due to nearshore topography. But that's something that looks like it'd be fun to figure out with some more study. The other regions are they're pretty similar in terms of relative prey percentages. And you can't really say, it might have something to do with prey availability. Or it might have something to do with prey selection. Gunnels they're a little higher in lipid content than sculpin. They would probably be favored by the PGs. So, Whidbey's numbers might represent that there just aren't as many gunnel available in our area. Not all of our colonies have this ratio. Some colonies have more sculpin than gunnels, and some have many more gunnels than sculpin. So it'd be fun to put some sense behind why this is the way it is. This shows the time distribution of prey deliveries. And this top blue line here is the total number of deliveries for each survey week during the season. And this shows that the peak is in the third week of July, and that is pretty much always true. So as you're sitting out there on the beach and you ease
Kevin
into
Silvers, he's the professor in charge of the whole forest coach planning class. So he just wrote me back and he said, hey, depending on how far away your property is, maybe I could come over after class one of these
Not
weeks
sure
with the
who's
holly injector.
Not muted right
Just take
now.
care of it right then and there. So I'm gonna see if he'll come by this Friday.
I'm
I
trying
thought
to-
I was being asked a question. I'm pretty
There we
interested.
go. I think I got it. Sorry, Dave.
Thanks, Shannon. I was waiting to answer, actually. And then these lines down below are each of the regions. It's pretty hard to see exactly what's happening with each. There is some variability there's some difference between the regions and when they peak. And Kitsap seems to peak maybe a couple of weeks before we do. And San Juan also, this is their first year, but it looks like they may get started a little earlier than the other regions and peak earlier. So that's another thing that would be fun to puzzle out a little bit, why some regions are a little earlier than others. But overall, it's the peak. We always reach the peak about in the third week of July. And this chart is a comparison, the same, it's basically the same. This blue line here is the same as the previous chart. And the orange line is for 2023. And you can see that they're pretty similar. Sometimes for Whidbey data alone, I've had it for like 6 years running, and they just basically superimpose on each other. We do log disturbances. There hasn't really been a study on the impact of disturbances or any kind of, what do they mean? Do they have some kind of impact on the success of pea group breeding? But anyway, here are some numbers. You'll see that the one on the left, 41% of the disturbances logged are due to bald eagles. And they are obviously the main disturbance. Although I have yet to see an eagle get a pigu, regardless of the pigu are really concerned about them. And the chart on the right-hand side shows that of the large disturbances, which are 30 minutes or longer, that only 8% of all of the disturbances are in that category. And I looked to see, all right, well, what ones are large? And about 3/4 of those were eagle disturbances. But still overall, the number not very large. And then you all experience this, the August exodus of the birds. It's pretty remarkable how quickly they leave. Just one survey, you might be out there and just looks almost normal, and the next survey you may see just a handful of birds. And it's always, it's always on August. Here are a couple of first and last and most things that I found in the data. So the first observed deliveries were on June 10th, and Clallam at Port Angeles and Whidbey at Rolling Hills had those. And the last observed delivery, this may actually even be later than September 17th, but it's South Sound, the Butterball Cove colony. And the most weeks between the first and last delivery to a burrow was 8 weeks. And again, there was a South Sound Butterball Cove burrow S2 and Whidbey Ledgewood burrow. Most deliveries to a burrow in a single survey is 6. And there were 3 burrows that had that. There were lots of burrows that had 5. I think 6 would be really fun, and 5 would be about 87% of the amount of fun that 6 would have. Most deliveries to a burrow during the season is 18, and Kitsap, Bainbridge, Fletcher Bay had that burrow, and Whidbey Lagoon Point North had a burrow with 18 as well. And most weeks surveyed, 18, which is over a third of a year, and that was South Sound Butterball Cove. That would be fun, because I have to say I wasn't really ready to stop the season this year. So I hope they enjoyed it. Now, there was some supporting data. I think Shannon will probably put this up on the website. And if you would like to do your own checking of data, there are 4 years of data here, data summary for each of the regions. So you can scrape data off of these and do your own analysis and prepare charts as you wish. And that's all I've got. Oh, and there's disturbances as well. That's it.
Thank you, Dave. So I will be sending everybody their own, or at least the regional leads, their own tailored packet, but I will be putting your graphs up on the website. So, but yep, they'll be able to play with their own data. So thank you very much. I know that takes a huge amount of time to put all of that together, and then also for all of your data support throughout the season. We are so fortunate to have you, and yeah, it's really interesting looking at the data and seeing how similar it is from year to year. I know a lot of folks wondered about if we started later this year or if the birds started later. And it looks like it really wasn't much, maybe 1 week.
Yeah,
one week slower, but
yeah, it's funny, every year, and I'm as guilty of this as anybody, it always feels different than the previous year. And you
right.
start thinking about, well, there's something going on here. And then you finally get it all together and look at it and go, well, no, it was actually pretty much exactly like the previous
Right.
year.
Yeah, it's really neat to see it, it's presented that way. And thank you for explaining everything. I love the quick hits at the end too. Those were some really interesting tidbits of information. So
Well, you're welcome. Thank you.
so much. And I realized that I missed a trivia question earlier, but I think we're going to go ahead and move on to our guest speaker. And if we have time at the end, we'll roll another one. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guest speaker, Rob Kaler. He was actually born in Spokane, Washington, so he's a Washingtonian, and he's now a wildlife biologist with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in the Migratory Bird Management Office in Anchorage, Alaska. He leads several marine bird research and monitoring projects in Alaska, including monitoring population trends of marine birds in Prince William Sound following the 1989 Exxon Valdez oil spill, and restoration of pigeon guillemots at the Naked Island Group following removal of mink. And he also follows the statewide Aleutian tern colony, the North Pacific Seabird Colony Register, Cook Inlet Seabird Colony Survey, and breeding biology of Kitzlitz's merlets in the Aleutian Islands. That's hard to say that. So he did go to Evergreen State College, where he got his BS degree, and he got his MS at Kansas State University. So thank you so much, Rob, for being here this evening. I'm really looking forward to hearing more about pigeon guillemots in Prince William Sound.
Yeah, how did I
Take it
do?
away.
Did I share the right screen?
You did.
Oh,
Looks beautiful.
yeah. And thank you, Shannon. That video was tear-jerking. It was inspiring, and you all are inspiring it, as well as Dave. That's whatever you guys are doing, it looks amazing. And I look forward to seeing what you guys do coming from the state of Washington, hopefully coming back there as my parents get older. Excited to get back on the west side of the state. But yes, I was born in Spokane, born and raised, went to the Evergreen State College. So, and you see my screen, although it doesn't seem to be lighting up, and maybe I break Zoom every now and then.
We can see it. It looks great.
All right. Yeah, that's excellent. So, pigeon guillemot restoration in Prince William Sound. And really, I want to say Sam Stark, he was a graduate student from Oregon State. I'm going to use a lot of his slides. I'm going to go through this. I guess a quick time check, Shannon. How am I doing?
Let's see, we're at 7:50 and we have until 8:30 for the presentation and questions. So
all right, so
lots of time.
So I don't need to speed through it. All right,
no.
So Sam Stark, David Irons, Kathy Kulitz. I mean, we all stand on shoulders of giants that came before us. And so a big shout out. Are we recording this too? Because I want to make sure that they're okay. I want to make sure that if they see this, that I shout it out. And of course, our funding partners, the Exxon Valdez Oil Spill Trustee Council, Oregon State University, APHIS, that's at the U.S. Department of, yeah, they actually did the animal removal that I'll get into. And then of course, the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation that has helped fund this. So again, yeah, I won't spend too much time on this, but I do a fair bit of different projects here in Alaska, based in Anchorage, not too far from the airport. And I will drop well, maybe Shannon, you'll drop my email. So if you do want to help out with any of these projects and you're interested, we're always looking for engaging with other folks. And it sounds like you guys are doing amazing work in the Salish Sea on guillemots. So I will just kind of speed through this, but one of the things that we have coming up is in the Cook Inlet, we're going to do a seabird colony census funded through the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. And we do an Aleutian tern project as well. So those are things that we're actively doing for the next 2-3 years. And then Quiana. Quiana is thank you. And that's kind of the land acknowledgement. So we're not on land. I mean, our birds breed on land, but we're doing a lot of our survey work in the waters off the shores of the Alaskan waters. So Quiana to all of our partners, the Inupiaq, the Siberians, the Yupik, that's in the Bering Strait. And so some of the information I'm going to cover is including those folks, but specifically for this talk, the Tlingit, the Haida, and the Tishmian. And that's where, thank you for letting us work. And of course, all of our other partners, Quiana to them as well, that are supporting, funding, and collaborating on this work. So Environment Canada is an example, USGS, Alaska Science Center. I could go on, but we have a lot of partners and it's an amazing opportunity to collaborate, much like what you all are doing. It's again, that video that Shannon put together, I wept. It was beautiful. It's so neat to see you guys doing everything that you do. So in Alaska, we talk about, these are my 2 slides that I'm going to say, 30 million birds breed in Alaska. And another 30 million come to Alaska during our summer. And by ours, they breed in the southern hemisphere. So those are the shearwaters. So this is a picture of shearwaters, sooties, and short-tailed that come up, and I say they take our resources, but no, we're sharing. And what really is, they are sharing their resources with us. And so there's another 30 million birds that even migrate up because of the high productivity waters in Alaska. And so this is the bird that this is how I get young people and excited about this. This is the Harley-Davidson of seabirds. This is a tufted puffin, the leather-clad Harley-Davidson biker type. It's got ear piercings, it's got big hair, but really, I mean, let's just cut to the chase. The guillemot. What a charming creature this guy is. And so this is an illustration from Eric Baker. He's one of the folks that helped out with Prince William Sound Marine bird surveys in July. But what a great bird. It's charismatic, and I won't go on and on about that because you all know how cool they are. And then we talk about common prey items in Alaska. So Dave touched on this a little bit. And so it was great to watch what you guys are doing and talking about. And so this is my basic slide where I say common prey items of seabirds in Alaska. So we've got sandlands, highly nutritious, prey quality, great. But they're in the near shores, subtidal. And then there's good years and there's bad years. Then we've got capelin, very much a cold water associated fish, but very high prey quality. So as ocean temperatures, especially in Alaska and probably in your neck of the woods too, or your neck of the waters, increasing sea surface temperatures and temperatures in general in the ocean, cold water associated, the capelin, high quality, but we're seeing fewer and fewer of them, and we're seeing them move further north. Juvenile walleye pollock, so lower quality prey, but their distribution is expanding. And so that warmer water, and this is also a commercial, commercial. So I'm sure most of you go to your freezer at your Fred Meyer's or your Rosars or whatever. And this is what you're finding there. So pollock. And then juvenile Arctic cod, they're further north. You're not going to find them in your freezer, blocks in Washington. And then euphausiids and the copepods, these are the really important because they're they're feeding everything as you go up. Locally, seasonally abundant, high quality prey. And we're probably really not understanding how much euphausiids and copepods contribute to the food system. And so what I saw Dave and Shannon talking about, we have no idea what guillemots are eating during the non-breeding season. So that's something to consider and think about. And then here's my example. The common murre weighs about 1,000 grams, and it needs to consume on a daily basis 10 to 30% of their body mass, which I know I could drop off about 20 pounds right now. I'm 49 years old, And I could drop off 90, and they need to eat 90 to 300 fish per day. And that depends on the quality of those fish. So something to consider, and something that when I talk to young people or even my leadership in Fish and Wildlife Service, something that needs to be addressed. And I'm just kind of putting this out here as a big picture idea. This figure here, which I really like, and I don't mean to spend too much time, but when Dave was talking about kind of the longer term like data that you are collecting, this is productivity. Reproduction, as Dave mentioned it. This is long term. This is like 40 years. And I'll just quickly, can you see my cursor, Shannon?
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, yeah, very quick. And of course, you don't see guillemots in here, but red-faced cormorants on the left side, across the right, Talese auklets. And this is, and then I go to the bottom here, primarily eating fish to primarily eating plankton. And what I wonder is, and I think guillemots are eating probably mostly fish, but maybe in the winter they're eating, and somebody can correct me in the audience for sure. But anyways, this is kind of from the North Chukchi Sea, northern Alaska, down into the Gulf of Alaska. These are the long-term sites that we have. And you guys, I think you guys have 8 sites. Is that correct, Shannon?
We have 8 regions.
8 regions. Yeah. And so from those regions, what we have 8 different sites that we're intensively monitoring, these different species. And so what you see is way above average, meaning like they did really good. And this is from 2023. This is last year. And I've colored this in. Then it doesn't come this way. I have to pull out my Crayola crayon. I colored it in. The nice thing is complete failure, boo, and very depressing. And when we had a 2014, 2016 heat wave in the Gulf of Alaska, we had a lot of complete failures, which for these seabirds, that's very uncommon. It does happen. It's not to say it's, unusual, but in that year in particular, it was very unusual. So take home message from this 2023, and maybe some things that you guys want to consider how you share your information that you're working very hard at. Here's a nice, and this is how we share it out. But overall, 2023 is actually a very productive year. And again, guillemots are not here, but we're looking at seabirds in general, from red-faced cormorants all the way over to least auklets, and we got parakeet auklets, etc. So I'm going to move pretty quickly. So one of the things that I got to do when I came into my position with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Migratory Bird in Anchorage was taking over the Prince William Sound Marine Bird Survey. And that survey was after the Exxon Valdez ran aground in 1989 on Bly Reef. So that was a huge impact, and I'll get more into that, but here's the big picture right now. And this goes from 1989 to 2022. That's how much data I've been able to analyze. And we're running around Prince William Sound, these Boston whalers. They're 20-foot Boston whalers. They've got twin 150 Honda horsepower motors on the back. As you could imagine, it's an adventure. I love it. And let me know if you want to come take part in that. In that lower left corner here, that's the idea where we've randomly selected 20% of the coastline. And this was based on David Irons in 1984, 1985. He did the entire coastline of Prince William Sound, all the coastline counting all of the birds. And so when the Exxon Valdez ran aground on Bly Reef in March 1989, the royal biometricians selected 20% randomly. Let's make sure that we're covering all of this area, but randomly, because we don't want to introduce bias. And so that's the red lines running coastlines. And I really do wish that they would have selected if there's a bunch of reefs that you need to avoid, let's not drive a boat 300 feet off the shore. But anyways, they didn't. So, and these are the population trends. And I've selected, here's 9 different species. Guillemots here, lower center left. And so guillemots, that slope, that indicates, and so you see from 1989 to 2022, that overall is a negative slope. The p-value there, that p-value is basically indicating that we're pretty confident, because it's less than 0.5, that yeah, truly the guillemot population in Prince William Sound has declined from 1989. And you see this gray area, that's that 95% how confident we are, 95% confidence interval around that point estimate. And we haven't done it every year. This is 17 years. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, no, 17. But you see down here, guillemots are not doing well in Prince William Sound. And I won't spend any time on these other species, but what I was trying to indicate here is like, there's good years and there's bad years. And now this is where I'm going to lean heavily on Sam Stark. So Sam actually works for the USGS National, he's a graduate student that we had working for us, Oregon State, and he's apparently out in the field because I wanted him to know that I was using all of his slides. Anyways, so here's the Naked Island, and this was Sam's master's project. He was at Oregon State. And so you see, Kathy Coolitz was out there in 1983. Well, she was actually out there in 1978. And I think Kathy she was invited to speak, and Kathy's retired. So she says, well, maybe Rob will want to do this, which I'm flattered to be invited. But you see, this is a population size estimate for the Naked Island group of guillemots. So on that left side, you see 1977, 78, the population mink were introduced. So at one point, somebody decided, I really want to trap mink, and I want to do it at Naked Island. So they brought mink out there, and that wasn't prohibited back in the 70s. And so there's other introduced species into, purposefully or not. So here's an Arctic fox, and there was a lot of introduction of Arctic fox throughout the Aleutians, for example. And then rats, they get on islands, and that's just shipwrecks that were already infested with rats. But then mink, and that mink that was purposeful at the Naked Island group. So this figure is just kind of showing that timeline, 1980 to 2010. And you see, these are our population counts as we were collecting them following the Exxon Valdez oil spill. And so mink introduced, we had about almost 2,000 breeding birds, breeding guillemots. And then by 2010, it was I think it was 75, it might've been 55. I forget the exact number, but here you show, and we're drawing a line between points, but you see the point. So the Exxon Valdez oil spill happens, and then that direct effect. And so when we say that end of EVOS, Exxon Valdez oil spill direct effects, that's to say that at that point in 2003, there was no longer any lingering oil in that near shore environment. It's not to say that there wasn't anything going on, but the direct effects based on taking blood from birds and testing it, we no longer felt that was an impact to the population. So data collection, this is with Sam Stark, nest searching at the Naked Island group, and then survival. And so being able to get into those nests. So, I'm not going to say that you guys are lucky, because I know you work hard to collect the information that you do, but here at Naked Island, these folks are roping up, putting on a harness, and I'm glad that it wasn't me. And then nest substrate and vulnerability. So I'm going to go over this really quickly, and maybe something that's very pertinent to what you guys are doing. So different parts of the nest or the cliff, burrows at the top. I mean, these are burrows. So the soil is soft and they can dig in. And then you got the cliff face. So those are crevices and stuff where a guillemot can get in and lay an egg. And then talus, everything that crumbles down to the bottom. So those were the three different substrates. And what happened over time is that before mink were established, so on the left side of this is a histogram, 1978, when Kathy got out there, to 1984, 1989 to 2008 in the center, and then 2017 on the right. These are Sam's figures. What you're seeing is nesting survival percentage. You see on that left side is that when Kathy was out there, Kathy Kulitz, the mean was about 75%. So that was before mink had become established. And then by 1989, 2000, you see a decline in the actual number of nest survival. And then by 2017, after mink had been removed, it increased back up to 86. And so you don't see any error bars, which this is just indicating like what's our confidence. And so we don't have those type of data, but you see that once we remove those mink, and I have another figure that will, kind of demonstrate this. Going back to the substrate use, you see Kathy, 1979. And so green on the top, that's the burrow, and that burrow being, that's where they could dig down. But of course, that's where mink could get to as well. And then talus on the bottom, that's where mink could get to as well. But that cliff face, the beige or yellow color, that's where birds were safe. So anyways, this figure is showing percent of nests. I'm going to go pretty quickly, but you see in 1979 that there were birds breeding in the talus, there was birds breeding on the cliff face, and there were birds breeding in the top where they could actually maybe dig in. By 2008, when mink were established, here it's saying mink common, you see that most of them are just here in the cliff face. And there were some at that top part, but these were still very accessible to the introduced mink. So this is the year that we, beginning in 2015, when mink removal was started, and you see this increase. So I'm gonna go through this quickly, but they began, guillemots began nesting up in the burrows on the top. They were also still on the cliff face, but the neat thing to see about that is like, well, they were going into areas that perhaps they had been extirpated from due to mink presence. And then the talus, maybe that's part of how they maintain their population despite having mink there. But throughout, you see in the cliff faces, the crevices, that's where mink remained. And so Sam Stark's conclusions, and I give full acknowledgement to Sam because he worked very hard. Mink removed, that appeared to be a primary limiting factor. Guillemot populations increased very quickly after that. I've got a figure that I'll show you. And then, what we're assuming is that nesting survival was not limited by other factors. So basically, it was having mink on that island. So the insult to injury, the insult being the oil spill, and the injury being an additional having a factor of mink present on the island that previously had not been there. And so the nest substrates shaped that predator community, that impact. So here's kind of a figure I'll go over this very quickly, but there's a before after impact control, a Backey study design. So we had the actually impacted area was the Naked Island group, Story, Naked, and Peak, 3 islands there. And then we wanted to compare that to areas that had never had mink introduced or present. And so there are mink present throughout Prince William Sound on the shoreline, but they'd never been. They swim, but they don't swim that far. And so our control was Fool Island to the west, and then Smith Islands, Little Smith and Big Smith, and then Seal Island. And so this figure here is showing the Naked Island group is in the black line. And this is in 2012, but you see, this is as we started removing mink, that population increased. The yellow or mustard line there shows that, well, here's the control islands being Fool, Smith, and Seal. you know, there's good years, there's bad years. They're kind of going up and down. But once you remove mink, and this is the red line showing when we removed mink starting in 2014, and by 2017, 18 was where we basically validated we have not seen any more mink. And this is Sam's work, the guillemot nests. And you see an increase in the number of guillemot nests at the Naked Island group. So, and then the other thing that Sam, glad it was him and not me, social attraction. And I'm not sure you guys need to do any of this in you know, in your neck of the woods or waters. But social attraction was one of the chapters that Sam did. And we were excited to have guillemots recovered, but the other impact at the Naked Island group following the oil spill was tufted puffins, Aleutian terns, and parakeet auklets. And if you don't know a parakeet auklet, this is one of our decoys. Very attractive bird, but they had historically, along with tufted puffins and Arctic terns, bred at the Naked Island group, and following the oil spill and then mink introduction have not recovered. So the setup, these poor guys, and I'm glad they got to do it, but one of these, you know, you bolt them into a mat, you carry up two 6-volt batteries, solar panels, recharging it, and then playing playback to bring birds to see if you could expedite the recovery of the birds, parakeet auklets, Arctic terns, pigeon guillemots to the Naked Island group. And so I'm not going to go over that too much, other than to say, well, at those social attraction sites, which Sam had 10 of those, well, parakeet auklets actually, and he's got great, you know, we then put up, we put up cameras and documented that parakeet auklets actually came back into two of the historical colony sites. However, Sam did not witness any attempts by guillemots to return to any sites, but there was that one that appeared to be parakeet auklet appeared to be attempting to nest. So with that, I was trying to keep it, maybe I was too short, but open up for questions or thoughts.
You're right on time. Thank you so much, Rob. I think you've given us some ideas.
And always happy to follow up with thoughts. I mean, you guys are, again, that video, Dave's sharing of the information. I mean, you guys are doing some really awesome stuff. And it's very, I mean, something that it'd be wonderful to be able to do something like that in Alaska, but it is inspiring. So I want you all to know that. That was cool. That's awesome.
So how do you survey the birds? Are you mostly doing aerial surveys, or are you actually doing, I guess you are doing some sort of nest surveys?
We were doing nest surveys, yeah. I didn't go into that too much, but boat-based surveys. So the 25-foot Boston whaler circumnavigating all of the islands, and then we do. And so and then our protocol, so it's usually late May into June, and at the high tide. So our protocol is very late, you know, when the because we're counting them in the water. You guys are looking at them, you know, going up to their nesting crevices and burrows. We're counting them on a water for a total population estimate. So that is a total, we're counting everything that we see. And we believe that they're attending colonies during the high tide. They're displaying, which of course we all love their displays, which your video is amazing, the images that you have there. But they are displaying off their colonies, reestablishing with their mates before they go up and begin either copulating or breeding. But our stuff is all boat-based and on the water. So we are 100 meters, 300 feet off the shore.
Great. Do we have any questions for Rob? I'll be monitoring the chat as well. So if you wanted to drop a question in the chat, I can relay that to Rob. Kathy.
Hi, Rob, this is Kathy Bauer on Whidbey Island. And I was just wondering if you'd had any experience with artificial nest boxes in your travels, or it didn't look like you had to, you didn't have to introduce any artificial boxes, but have you run into that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Kathy. So Greg Goulet, back in the 1990s, did his PhD, and we still see those, don't tell the US Forest Service. I'm sure there was permits for that, but they did that where they tried to, so some of those nest boxes are still up on the cliffs, but it didn't work. And it might be something that works in your area, but at the Naked Island group, it didn't, nesting sites were not the limiting factor. So limiting factor, probably mink. Insult to injury was the oil spill. And then now there's food. If I might go on a little bit, but 2014, 2015, the heat wave, the blob, as they called it, or as we call it, the guillemots actually still did very well at Naked Island. So we either did great removing the mink, maybe the food was still there, the resources and the nutrient content of those fishes, and they're near shore foragers, but did not seem like nesting sites was the limiting factor. Do you guys think that do you think that might be a limiting factor in your?
We've just been talking about, because of there's been a nesting on piers and old docks, and as those start to come down, or pigeons and mammals get in there, there's been some talk about adding more nest boxes. So I know that Frances would have asked that if she was still here or thought about it.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And some of, we work with folks in California, and that was one of their questions too, is they were taking down a bridge that guillemots were nesting on. How would that impact the population?
Yeah, and talking with Scott Pearson, who's works with WDFW, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife actually tried to put in some nest boxes around Puget Sound, and they were not very successful. We do have a few boxes at the Fort Worden Pier still, and the birds seem to like to sit in them, but we have yet to see them actually delivering prey to these nest boxes. So I think they learned that the pigeons like to use them more than the pigeon guillemots. So.
Yeah, no, that's interesting too.
They have used them on Protection Island with some limited success. As far as I know. Yeah. So we have a question from Terrence, who's a fellow GUI-DEC and the former coordinator for the South Sound region. And he's wondering if you have a sense of citizen science in general up in your neck of the woods, avian or otherwise.
Let's see here. Not to get everybody depressed before they go to bed, but seabird die-offs have been a huge issue in Alaska. I know in the lower 40, and I know some people don't, we don't mean to refer to you as the lesser or lower 48, but we in Alaska, somehow we have some issue, but a lot of seabirds have been dying, washing up on shore, counting that. So we work with the Coastal Observation and Seabird Survey team very closely, COAST, based out of the University of Washington, Seattle. That's been as an example of elevating citizen science and work in Alaska. That's kind of been a huge example. And so working on other things, we have indigenous, I always have a hard time pronouncing that, Indigenous Sentinels Network. And we're working with everybody, whoever, and I'm a shore person on the coast. So anytime that we can get reports of observations. So the Indigenous Sentinels Network is an example. And then working with our captains that are managing boats, whatever they see, reporting that. And so those are examples of some of the citizens. And I call it citizen science, call it captain science, call it whatever you want. But reporting those observations is, well, as funding for the, my agency, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, it's been challenging. So we continue to rely heavily on partners, including citizens and other agencies. So that's my long answer. My short answer is write me and see what we can do. But yeah, you guys are doing amazing. Very neat to see what you guys are up to.
Well, I think seeing what you guys have been dealing with up in Alaska, especially following the oil spill in mink, it just makes me realize even more how important our study is, that we have this data. If anything should happen, if some kind of disaster or natural event happens, we've got data that we can look to and use.
Exactly, Shannon. It's just like, oil spill response, ship groundings, and then mariculture, aquaculture that's being pushed forward pretty heavily here in Alaska, probably similarly in Washington. And where are these birds in there? The interactions, the impacts of that industry, and we don't want to poo-poo. We want to support it, but we want to do it in a prudent, pragmatic approach.
Exactly. Yeah. Are there any other questions for Rob?
Yes, I have one.
Okay, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Kathleen O'Shaughnessy, and I'm in Olympia, so surveying in the South Puget Sound area. I wondered, first of all, the presentation was very informative and helpful. I think those of us who are citizen scientists will be urged to continue our work, knowing it's adding.
Then I succeeded.
Knowing it's adding to something that's pretty important, I think. But I had a question on the surveys. I don't know what time of the days that people do the surveys. In the South Puget Sound area, do we always do them? Our group did it from 8 to 9 in the morning, and I'm wondering if other groups surveyed at other times of the day, and if there's any information to suggest that might matter about the food deliveries, either time of day and or tides. I'm wondering if there's any impact that is known about that.
We do survey sometime after the sun comes up, and then the survey has to be done by 9 a.m. So everyone should be surveying in the morning before 9 a.m. And there is actually a correlation. I think maybe, Rob, you mentioned that too. There's a correlation both with time of day and tidal height. So, and it depends on each colony. Each colony is different. It depends on, how shallow it is or how steep the beach incline. So there are a lot of factors that go into determining PIGU activity, but it tends to be highly correlated with the time of day, so early in the mornings, and then also high tides seem to show a lot of activity as well. So,
okay, thank you.
Yep. Let's see, Reed has a question. We do see a lot of serious eagle disturbances, but little, if any, predation. And they're curious if that's true for you as well up in Alaska, because you have a lot of more than us, I think.
Yeah, looking at what Dave presented there, the pie charts showing disturbance, and we love the fact that eagles and all the other raptors are recovering following DDT. So that's awesome, but we definitely are concerned how eagles are impacting. And it's not so much eagles. I think Dave might have mentioned that nobody's perhaps, sorry, don't mean to say nobody. Observing an eagle taking a guillemot has not been observed, But what happens on mini colonies, and I'm a seabird person in general, so guillemots is just one piece. But when a colony is disturbed, a eagle flying over, for example, it's all the other predators that come in. Guillemots, being crevice and burrow nesters, probably less impacted, but at the same time, it's disturbance. And so I'm thinking of ledge nesters here in Alaska that an eagle flies over, and then you've got, let's see here. Well, I just start, we got our COVID, well, we used to call them American crows. And I guess now they're, well, Northwestern crows, now they're what, magpies,
Even gulls, I think, will.
Gulls, yeah, everybody comes in and eats the eggs, but those are mostly ledge nesters. So I'm just kind of thinking about how eagle presence and disturbance would be impacting guillemots. Maybe that's on the water that they're being disturbed. Or
It is mostly on the water.
yeah.
They tend to hold prey. The birds tend to hold the prey rather than deliver it.
Mhm.
So the guillemots are, staged off, waiting to feed. They've got and then the eagles are interested in that. So.
Yeah, I think usually the eagles are just cruising by, but the guillemots take
Yeah.
off. So they're not going to stick around and find out what the eagle's up to.
Yeah, eagles have definitely, this is actually something I've been triaging my inbox this last 2 weeks. There's a lot of concern about feeding eagles, particularly for, I think, tourism. And it turns out it's not illegal to feed eagles for tourism, but that's something that happens in Alaska. Probably, maybe not if you want to go photograph an eagle, you just go out your door and go down to the Skagit or wherever, right? I mean, here in Alaska, we got a lot of tourists coming up. They want to see the eagles, so there's a bit of feeding, but it's not illegal. There's the Golden and Bald Eagle Protection Act, and it does not prohibit feeding eagles, for example. So, but their populations are doing pretty well in Alaska, and coming from Washington, I know eagles have been doing fairly well, and the Skagit in particular. That's where we would go and take photos.
So Linda's wondering if pig ewes have unique wing patterns.
Unique what patterns?
Wing patterns. So I think she's talking about the white wing pattern.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. There's probably better, somebody.
I would say that they do, actually. Just from looking at a lot of photos, I've seen some with some really unusual wing patterns. I mean, in general, they look similar, but every so often we see one that looks different. So it can happen. We had
that's a cool question. I hadn't really thought about that. I'm just glad that they have white wings so that I can, find them as I boat by.
They're easier to spot than the auklets. Well, thank you so much, Rob. This has been wonderful just to get a glimpse into a different pig ewe population and what's happening up there in Alaska. And we are at 8:30, but I thought I would also open it up if anybody had any questions for Dave really quick. I don't want to keep anyone too long, but I did not ask if there were questions for Dave earlier. Anything pressing?
I have questions for Dave, but I can follow up later.
All right. Well, if there's anything else that you wanted to know, you can shoot me an email or Rob an email or Dave an email, and hopefully we can get some of those questions answered for you. So that's what we have for this evening. Thank you everyone for being here and just for a wonderful season. It was great working with everybody and getting stories and photos. Oh, I have a question here from Jackie before I sign off. Go ahead, Jackie.
So,
you're
this
go.
is Dave, from looking at your data, would you say that the Guillemot fledglings are somewhere between the second week and third week of July?
You're asking, do they start to fledge at
Mhm.
that point? Let's see, if we back that up, say 35 days, we're into what, about the middle of June? Yeah, that they could. Oh, I'm sorry, the middle of July, you said, Jackie?
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, second week in July, sort
Yeah,
of.
definitely. Some of our, we have a south facing rolling hills colony that is very warm, and it starts early every year. And they're definitely fledging by that time.
Okay, okay. I was just wondering, like with the eagles, they're sort of fledgling right around 4th of July, and that becomes an issue with the cacophony of fireworks on Whidbey. And with the Guillemot being obviously in the bluffs above the shore, I was just wondering if that has any impact but it sounds like they're fledging a little bit later maybe than the eagles, or maybe right about the same time, but.
Yeah, I think some of them are early, but I don't know, Shannon, do you remember when people started reporting the first fledgling sightings this year?
Oh gosh, it was definitely, I think it was towards the end of July. But that doesn't mean it didn't happen sooner, because we did have some prey deliveries in, I think, the third week of June.
June
So
10th were the
it could
first
be
one.
around middle of July to third week of July that we would expect to see some fledging.
Okay, great, thank you.
And I do want to mention, I forgot to place that story map link in the chat earlier, Rob. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, probably confusing everybody.
I
but
had it in
yes,
my notes, but Rob has a story map. Maybe you could just speak about that really quickly and tell us what that is.
Yeah, that's basically a better version of what I just gave you all. We had an undergraduate at Williams and Mary, but the recovery following, the insult, the injury, and how Guillemots are doing after that. And I lean on all of David Irons, Kathy Kulitz, Dan Roby, Sam Stark. So that was what I threw in there. So, and I am really kind of curious about the food quality and items that you might be seeing being brought back, the photography that you might be able to do, the citizen science contributions to capturing that, as I touched on.
Sure.
There's different food that some of it's good and some of it's just like a bag of Doritos. So anyways, maybe,
Which I
for
imagine
another
the dolphin
time.
is, or maybe the shrimp. Yeah,
Costco shrimp. I love that. That's
I know, it's
frozen.
good stuff. All right, well, thank you so much. And thank you again, everyone. Thank you for putting in all the early mornings and the effort, and for loving the birds.
Thanks,
We
Shannon.
appreciate you. All right, take care. Have a good evening.